Okay. As we mentioned last time about chapter 12 of Hebrews, a lot of the book is specifically designed to try to warn these Hebrew Christians not to make the unfortunate move of leaving all that they have under the law of Christ, under the new covenant, and going back and try to get their justification through the old covenant, through the law of Moses. And we've studied that at some length, obviously. Yes, please. And what's the one word that we said might could be used to sum up the entire book of Hebrews?
Better.
Yes, the word better. In many different ways, using several different comparisons, he shows that the new covenant under Christ and the promises available through him are better. They're better than the messages of the prophets. They're better than the message delivered by angels. They're better than the words spoken from Moses, and so on. Then when we got to chapter 11 and 12, even though he's continuing some of the same thoughts, 11 and 12, at least in my view, have more of an application that we can glean as Christians in the 21st century, because even though they were spoken to people in the first century, all that chapter 11 says about faith and what it means and what it accomplished, and the people that were driven by faith, who thought and acted by faith, what they were able to do. Surely there's good application for us in that as well. And then we finished chapter 11 and into chapter 12. What's the main thought in the first part of chapter 12? What point is he making in the first part of chapter 12 after finishing the thoughts of chapter 11?
We're running a race by faith.
Okay. We're running a race by faith. It's almost like he said, speaking of faith, from chapter 11, here's what we're all about. And he mentions two, I was going to say groups. One of them is a group, one of them is not a group. What does he mention in the first part of chapter 12?
Cloud of witnesses.
Cloud of witnesses. And who's he referring to, do you think, in the cloud of witnesses?
Faithful people of Old Testament.
Right. The people that he had just talked about in chapter 11. And he goes on to expound on that when he says in verse 1 of chapter 12, therefore, there's our word that we see so many times, since, and it's just logical reasoning. It's like, since this is the case, then here's what you need to do. If this, then this. Since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which so clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. So he said, he doesn't say, since you've got so many people cheering for you, these people who have lived their lives by faith and are now cheering you on, you've pretty much got it made. And you can just kind of cruise along and everything will be fine. It's just not at all what he says. He says, because of that, use that as an impetus for you to double down on your efforts throw off the sin that clings so closely, lay aside every weight, and run with endurance. So, if it says run with endurance, what kind of race are we talking about from a physical standpoint, if you can read my mind?
A marathon.
Right. It's like a marathon. It is not a sprint. And we could give all sorts of visual images to that. But he said, no, you've got to be in this for the long haul, and you've got to take some steps to get the sin that bogs us down, that distracts us, that causes us to not be properly focused. Get that away. Get that away. I get very southern sometimes. Get that away. And then he says, looking to, say it, Sonia. Jesus. The author and perfecter, or pioneer and finisher, or trailblazer and end all the different things we talked about last week. And he's the one that we focus on. And that's one of the main reasons why I decided to entitle this book, Fixing Our Eyes on Jesus. As a matter of fact, that's the phrase that some of the translations actually use. That's not means that is necessarily better than anything else, but to me it connotes the idea that number one, since this is a marathon, this is a long race, yes, we're being cheered on, but we have to focus on some things and on one particular person. And since that's the case, we're not just doing the best I can, and every once in a while we'll glance over and see something about Jesus and so forth. This is not glancing, this is fixing our eyes on Jesus. This is a steady focus on Jesus. And why on Jesus? He's the founder and perfecter or completer of our faith. As we mentioned last time, the word "our" is actually not even in the original faith. Jesus is what faith is all about. Jesus showed in his life what it meant to be faithful to the will of his Father. When he says, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in chapter 13, about what Jesus had to endure. It was a not only horrible death as far as suffering and agony, but it was specifically designed to be as humiliating and shameful as could possibly be to the one who's being executed in that way. Phil?
To give you an analogy, it's like a runner in the Olympics. They're running for that gold medal. And so as Christians, we're running towards the finish line and the prize that we'll get at the end. And that's the crown of life, you know.
That's right. That's right. If we take our eyes off of that and start getting distracted, therein lies the problem with the lack of focus. Sonia?
Along those lines, if you've ever run for any distance, when you're running, you're looking ahead, and if you're like me, you're huffing and puffing, and you're saying, if I can just get to that point, I'll be doing good. But you're looking at that point saying, I got to get there. But if you look over here, you're going to start going there. You need to be looking here, and Jesus is our goal.
Right.
So if we keep looking at him and focusing on him, we're going to keep our mind, our body ready and in the place it needs to be.
Right. And Jesus is in front of us, not behind us, right?
And he's not like, oh, I got to divert over here, or I got to divert
Right.
over there. It's
Right.
always in front of us.
he has already crossed that finish line. And yes, the people, the great people of faith, the great cloud of witnesses are cheering us on. They're saying, you can do it. That is true. But Jesus is saying it even more forcefully and eloquently as the one who went there before us. And you're right. Neither to the left nor to the right, but straight ahead is what we're looking for. And then he gets into it. Any other comments about that before we?
I would say he was despised and rejected. You know, he was betrayed by his own people, and he still endured it.
That's right.
Cross, you know?
And actually, he gets into that some. Look at verse 3. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. Who's the him there? Jesus. Right. He said, look what Jesus went through, what he endured and so forth. And when he goes on to say, verse 4, in your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted the point of shedding your blood. In a way, it's kind of a nice way of saying to the Hebrews, you people think you've had it bad? Seriously? Almost shaming them, although not coming quite that far. He's admonishing them to say, there are going to be hard times. But he said, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. Now that doesn't mean that they need to go out and start shedding some blood in some form or fashion so it'll make it seem better. He's just giving a comparison here about struggles against sin and what happens as we struggle against that. And that leads him into, beginning of verse 7, about the chastening or discipline of the Lord. We talked about that some on Wednesday night, so we won't get back into that, except to say that I'm convinced that a lot of us, myself included, sometimes get into, when some struggles come along, whether it's struggles, spiritual struggles, struggles within the church, struggles between that involve people that have gotten off track, and the truth is falling by the wayside for them, and dealing with that. We sometimes start saying, woe is me. Why is this happening? Why does God allow this to happen to me? And so forth. Well, this chapter answers that question, at least to some extent. Now, we can't necessarily, I don't believe in our finite wisdom, say, okay, the reason why this person did this toward me is because God set up a scenario so that this, and this would happen. We may not be able to do that, but this passage clearly shows to me, unless I'm missing something, when it says, verse 7, it is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom a father does not discipline? And then it says that he disciplines us for our good. And we learn lessons from our earthly fathers. They disciplined us the way they thought best. God's one step above that. God doesn't discipline us as he thinks best. He disciplines us as is best for us. And so sometimes what I need, I think what we all need sometimes, is a wake-up call to say, there may be a very good reason why these things are happening. It may be a wake-up call to me to realize I need to get my act together in some respects. Or, at the very least, if none of that, just to say this is a wake-up call to let me know that I've been counted worthy of suffering some things for the cause of the Lord. And what a great thing that is. But he said, the Lord disciplines us for our good. He said, now no discipline when it happens is pleasant. It's not fun. We don't jump up and down and say, this is great. It's unpleasant. But it's unpleasant for a reason. If we can get it through our gray matter, that there's a reason why this is happening, and maybe a wake-up call for me, Phil.
We may endure suffering from Satan, because you see the life of Job. God allowed Satan to put all this on him just to test him, so that he would endure it all.
Yeah, that's right. And that in that particular case, Satan was doing that, but you're right, God allowed that. God could have said, no, that's not going to happen. But God specifically allowed that, and Job came out the better for it in the long run by keeping his perspectives in order. So, and yes, it's true that in a sense, Satan is the one that's behind the temptations. James says, every man is tempted when he's drawn away by his own desires and enticed. And when desire is finished, it brings forth sin. When sin is finished, it brings forth death. So the desires, those carnal, fleshly desires, Satan's feeding those. But the simple fact is that we need to realize that in our struggles, we have to realize that God plays a part sometimes in teaching a lesson. Verses like, the trying of your faith works patience. That means some good can be accomplished by it. As he says in verse 11, for the moment all discipline seems painful rather than good. Rather than pleasant. But later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. He says good can come out of this if we let it. But if we start taking the wrong approach and blaming God, not being introspective enough to realize there's something probably that I need to be thinking about and doing, then it can go in the wrong direction. Any further questions about that?
You can look at these athletes, they have to train in order to get to where they want to go. They just kind of give up, or they do a little bit of it and then take a break, and then they're going to pay for it later.
Yeah.
And the competition's going to make them look bad too. So.
Right. And I think of a couple of videos that I've seen when you mentioned that about people running a race, and this being a marathon, you run and run and run and run and run, and then there's the finish line. And I've won. I've beaten everybody. Except at the last second, here comes somebody right past me that I didn't see. Now, it's not like we're trying to compete in that way, but our cheering needs to come after the finish line, not before the finish line.
David?
Yes, sir.
I could point out one thing that I think is important, is that when we are going through these difficult times, that we make sure that we're looking for the reason that God is allowing us to do this, instead of concentrating on how unpleasant it is, and how we don't want to go through this. if we engage in prayer, and I've done this myself in going through difficult times, Lord, help me to have the wisdom to see what lesson it is that I'm trying to get out of this. Because this is not fun. I don't want to go through it again. I want to learn this lesson once and then move on. And so I do think it's important that we engage God in a closer conversation, because it's easy to walk away from Him when things are not going well. And that's exactly the opposite of what we need to be doing. We need to be asking God, help me to see
Yeah.
what it is that you're trying to get me to see.
That's right. And that comes through some communication, asking for wisdom. Earlier in Hebrews, when we studied about that we may boldly approach the throne of grace, whereby to find mercy and grace to help in time of need. Well, sometimes our time of need is, Lord, help me to understand this. Because He knows that our wisdom is very finite and that sometimes we don't really clearly understand. But we would not be told to boldly approach the throne of grace to find help if there was no help there. Why would He say that if there was no help available for us to go and say, please give me some wisdom. Help me to understand what's happening here. And that does several things. Number one, it looks to Him and to His help and to His wisdom instead of our own. And it provides us with some humility to say, Lord, I just don't have the answer here. Please help me. And He tells us we can do that boldly. And again, He wouldn't say that if it wasn't an avenue that we can pursue. Reed, did you have that?
Just to build on that point, right after James develops this idea of count it all joy when you encounter trials of various kinds, after he finishes that, the next topic is, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God. He cannot do it without doubting.
Yeah.
But that's not an accident, that after I just told you this really radical, difficult instruction, if you're struggling to wrestle with that, if you don't have the wisdom to, then
That's right.
ask God.
Yeah. And again, those passages are passages of comfort to me. They're put in, the Holy Spirit puts those in Scripture for a reason. They're not in there just to fill up space. That is something that it may take a little bit of time for us to grasp some things, but He doesn't say, if any man needs wisdom, let him ask for God and say, God, I need wisdom right now. It took Paul a while to figure out that the thorn in the flesh wasn't going to be removed from him, even when he was being spoken to directly. But the promise is still right there. It says, let him ask in faith. Sandy?
I think for us, because you've said it several times, and it's what we want. And it's fine to ask God to help us understand. But sometimes we're not going to understand. Part of the wisdom is to accept. Because sometimes there's not an answer. There's not an earthly answer, or there doesn't seem to be an
Right.
earthly answer for some things that happen. And we won't always, I hear people say, I want to understand. I don't understand. Well, part of it, in my opinion, is acceptance that God is doing what's best for us.
Yes. Right. And I think about some of these people that he talks about from the Old Testament. Horrible, horrible things were done to them. I would dare say that some of them, when that was happening, were praying, saying, why is this happening? Do not understand it. And then later on, even after they're killed, Revelation talks about the souls under the altar, those that have been martyred for the cause of Christ, are crying out, "How long, O Lord? How long till our blood is avenged?" And they were told they had to wait a little longer. And so, as the Spirit told Paul about the thorn in the flesh, he said, "My grace is sufficient for you." Period. That's the end of this. This is what's going to happen. My grace is sufficient, and you move on. That sometimes maybe that's what we get is just keep moving. Don't give up.
Job's wife was a good example of somebody that didn't understand this concept when she encouraged him to curse God and die. And he said, though he slay me, yet I will trust him.
Yeah.
And so clearly, it doesn't matter what happens to me, even if he decides to kill me, I'm still going to trust him. And so that's the whole basis of faith. Is, I mean, if we knew all the answers, there wouldn't be a reason for faith.
That's right. We walk by faith, not by sight. If we can see it all, then there's no reason really for the faith in the beginning. All right, let's take a couple of things from the end of chapter 12. I asked a question about question number 12 of chapter 12. What point is being made in verses 18 through 24? 25 words or less. What point is he making in 18 through 24?
People come to God without fear.
People do what?
We can come to God without fear.
All right, and what specific point does he make to make that point? Let me say it. What does he contrast? What two things does he contrast?
Mount Sinai versus Mount Zion.
Okay. All right. Again, we'll just touch on this briefly, but it's a very, very powerful passage. What does he characterize about what happened at Sinai?
That's where the 10 Commandments were given. And where they sinned, they made that golden
Right,
calf.
right. But how does he characterize the scene? It was a wonderful, joyous scene, right? People were dancing and singing and so forth. Shake your head this way.
Oh, she said fear. I don't think you heard her.
Oh, who said fear? Thank you. Fear, yes. Everything associated was from a physical standpoint, was terrible, fearful. And we won't get into all the things he says in the verses to characterize that, but it was a very, very terrifying setting there. That doesn't mean that it was necessarily saying bad things were happening, but it was a terrifying scene. And what does he contrast that with? Somebody's already said Mount what?
Mount Zion.
Which is what?
Jerusalem was in Jerusalem.
Okay. Which Jerusalem?
The heavenly Jerusalem.
Okay. He says, "But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels in joyful assembly." Is that, do you get the picture of a terrifying scene there? No, not at all. It's an incredibly joyous, blissful scene. He said, that's what's in store for you. And of course, then the application obviously is for us. And we go back to our big word, not big word, main word, better, 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 immeasurably better. He talks about an innumerable company of angels. Sandy, get ready to read. Revelation chapter 5, verses 11 and 12. This is the throne scene in heaven.
Then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000, and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing.
All right. That's, Hebrews talks about an innumerable company of angels. John tries to put some number on it. He says 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. And I realize this is not meant to, that he sat down there and counted off. I'll give 1, 2, 3, but 10,000 times 10,000 is 100 million. And then thousands and thousands on top of that. An incredible scene of glory and joy and bliss is what we're waiting on. And how different that is, and how much better it is for what we're waiting on. And so why in the world would you ever want to go back to the old way of doing things when this is what we have to look forward to, Ronnie?
And I think there's another emphasis that seems to me to be the major emphasis here, the contrast. Look at verse 18. For you have not come to a mountain that may be touched. And then in verse 23 it says, but you have come to Mount Zion, and then a series of twos, to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, two, notice the twos all the way down through that series.
Right.
This is what you come to as Christians. Are you going to go back that old physical way,
Right.
the trumpets and the blaze and the fire and all that, or do you desire to come to heaven?
Yeah.
That's the contrast that's
Yeah.
being drawn.
And the way he portrays it, it is a huge contrast. And
That's why the church is the spiritual body.
right.
It's
Right.
the spiritual body of people.
Yeah, the heavenly Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That's what we're going toward. And do some reading also in Revelation, not only chapter 5, but in other places. It talks about, I saw a new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. That's what he said this is all about, not the old way of doing things. Then the last question I had was, he closes the letter, closes the chapter talking about something that he's giving warnings about something. And I said, how is it similar to the chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, and chapter 10, verses 26 through 31? All three of these passages are warnings about doing what? Or not to do what?
Well, they're showing gratitude.
Okay, but what contrast is he making in each of those three passages? Between two, he says, here's what happened under the old law. If people rejected Moses' law, beginning in chapter 2, then again in chapter 10, and now here in chapter 12, he says, if they did not escape when they refused him who warned on earth, much less will we escape if we reject him who warns from heaven. That's not hard to understand, is it? He said, if under the old law there was retribution for rejecting Moses' law, he says here, as he did in chapter 2 and chapter 10, it's going to be even worse for rejecting the spiritual law of Christ, about him who warns from heaven. And he ends the chapter with the verse that ought to get everybody's attention. It certainly gets mine. For our God is a consuming fire. Why do you think he put that in there? I mean, obviously the Holy Spirit directed. What's the point?
reject Christ, then you've sealed your fate.
That's right. And there's something that's going to be done about it, right? By somebody who's easily powerful enough to do something about it. Do not be deceived. You could go with a bunch of other passages in the New Testament. But he said, our God is a consuming fire. Our God is a God of infinite love and grace and mercy. That is absolutely true. And thanks be to him that he is that way. But he's also a consuming fire. All right. Chapter 13. It's not in my hands. Sandy and I are going to be out of town this next week, but on Wednesday night, Joe McCall is going to lead you through chapter 13, and that will be the finish of the study. And so I'll let him do that as he sees fit. Please look over these questions for chapter 13. There's very, very timely admonitions in there for us about our attitude toward Jesus and what our obligations are. Let me just say from a personal standpoint, I really appreciate your participation in the class. Hopefully it's been a good class. It certainly has been a good one for me to think about these things. And so Joe will do that on Wednesday night, and then next Lord's Day, we'll start the new quarter. And Brother Reed will start his Galatians study. Look forward to that.